Um, okay, so good morning and welcome to our Health and Nutrition Week 4. I'm excited about, everything that we're learning about, and I hope that you are too. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of things that sometimes aren't as easy to talk about. And I'm going to tell you that, there are a lot of things that we go through in our lives that sometimes we feel like we have the wrong emotions. And we're going to talk about that today. And let's get started here with some prayer requests. Any prayer requests? And I'm going to ask you guys to pray for me. Monday morning, I'm going to be having surgery on my back. So I will still be here Tuesday for class because I can sit up. And so I'm going to, hopefully, I am going to be able to do that. Um, Let me see. What did you do today? Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that, Kaden. So we'll pray for your finger that it heals pretty quickly. Um, oh, Kaden, I'm sorry about your grandmother. Hopefully she was saved and you'll be able to see her someday in heaven. And that'll be something that we can all look forward to is seeing our loved ones someday. Any others? Okay, I'll start with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for today and for all that you do for us, Lord. I pray that you would just be with Caden and his family at this time as they're grieving the loss of their grandmother. And I just pray that they would just remember all the wonderful things that happened in their lives because of her. And I pray that you would just give them comfort at this time. Dear Lord, I pray that you'd also be with his finger, that you would heal that quickly. And dear Lord, I pray that you would just be with my surgery that's coming up. I pray that you would just heal my back quickly and help this surgery to work. And I just pray that you would just be with each one of us as we go about our day, that we would be a blessing to somebody else. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Okay, we're going to go over a few things here this morning before we play our game. But let me ask you a question. And this was up at the screen to begin with. But how different would the world be if animals could talk? Most of us have a pet. And, you get a lot of comfort from your pet. And my I haven't been feeling too well this past weekend. I had a horrible migraine that lasted for 2 days, and I have been dealing with my back, and so I can't do a lot. But my dog likes to just sit right there next to me and just knows that I'm not feeling well. A lot of times he's just kind of wanders around. He sleeps in his bed, but when I'm not feeling well, he comes and he sits right on my lap, which is really neat. Oh, Narnia. Okay. Oh, I love that. That is one of my favorite movies. Yes. Yeah, I can imagine they would have a lot to say. It would be really neat to be able to hear them. They're so comforting when you need them, don't aren't they? It's like they know when you're sad or, hurt, and they come over to you. Like my daughter, we used to pretend just we'd sit outside just to see what the animals would do, and she'd pretend to cry. So she would just pretend to cry and the cats would just come running and like, "Oh, is she okay?" And it's so funny how they can ignore you, but then when they don't think that you're feeling well, they're very loving. Books are always better. Oh, I'll tell you, I love reading those books. They're just so good. Oh, okay. Well, if you have a pet, hopefully you'll just give them a little extra love, but think about what would they do if they could talk? It would be really fun. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some things that we never, excuse me, never got to finish last week. And so if you have your notes from last week and you want to take those, you can. Excuse me. And we're just going to talk about a few things that we missed. Okay, so you guys are talking about your Quizlet. Serotonin is and melatonin are chemicals that our body creates, and serotonin helps regulate your duration of sleep. So if you are having a hard time sleeping, it's usually because we have blocked that serotonin somehow. And as you guys have become teenagers, maybe you've realized that you can't sleep earlier the way you used to. You're wanting to stay up a little bit later and you're not tired. And you see that your sleep has changed. And sometimes you're even tireder, like you want to sleep longer. And that's because your body is growing. And not only your body, but your brain. You're working on things that are harder. So you're wanting to sleep longer. That's why I thought it was so good for us to homeschool is I noticed that especially my son wanted to stay up later than my daughters. They wanted to stay up late, but my son wanted to stay up even later. Sometimes it was because he got a chance to play video games and it really messed with his brain. It does. Playing video games or sitting on your phone, there's a lot of blue light that comes off. And I would recommend that you guys in class wear blue light glasses. My glasses block blue light, so it helps me to not get disrupted by the amount of time I spend in front of the computer. And even if they make them so there's no prescription lenses there or magnification. They just make blue light glasses so you can wear while you're at the computer. And that would be a good thing for you to do, even if you're looking at your phone or playing video games. If you want to. That's up to you. I don't collect those, but they do help you when you take your quizzes or tests and different things like that. But serotonin regulates your sleep time, and melatonin is your sleep wake cycle. So they're both produced by the pineal gland, and it responds to light and darkness. And there's a lot you think about, like all the animals, some of them respond more to nighttime, they're more nocturnal, and sometimes they're diurnal, they're more awake during the day. Same thing with flowers. They plants, they need like us the same amount of not only daylight, but they also need nighttime to help regulate that photosynthesis to produce sugars. So our bodies are the same way. They need that sleep and that wake cycle. If you go a couple days without sleeping very much, you notice, sometimes even just a day, you notice that it really affects your attitude, doesn't it? Maybe you get a little cranky. And maybe you're just, a little ornery. Maybe you don't want to talk to anybody, you just want to be alone. And, you see that it affects you so very much. It affects so much in your body. Okay, so that's called your circadian rhythm, which is your natural sleep wake cycle. And as it's changing, and when you become teenagers and you see that it's changing, that serotonin and melatonin change a little bit because there's extra hormones being produced. You see that it changes that sleep wake cycle. And sometimes you get a little cranky and you let it out with everybody else. And learning to control our emotions is part of growing up. And so learning to control that when you're frustrated with somebody, or somebody's talking to you and you don't want to be talked to, learning how to control that is one of the things that God asks us to do, to control our emotions. And so learning how to do that is hard, isn't it? There are certain things, like I'm pretty easygoing for the most part, but sometimes there are certain things that somebody does that just drive me crazy, and I think it shows on my face. I try to keep my outside looking good, and I try to keep it inside and say it's really not a big deal. I don't need to overreact, but sometimes my facial expressions show that I'm upset, and that's something that we all need to work on. And so that's something, especially as teenagers. Your facial expressions show exactly how you feel. And so sometimes we need to work on those facial expressions also. Now, there's a gland called the hypothalamus gland near your pituitary gland. See right there, you can see where it's pointed to in our picture here. And they're very small glands, but they have a vital role in our bodies. They work at regulating the endocrine system. And the hypothalamus is called the master regulator, and it sends signals to the pituitary gland that releases hormones. And those hormones do so much. Okay, your pituitary gland not only regulates like your height, your weight, um, your metabolism, reproduction, stress. There's so many different things that it works on. And so if that is off, it really wreaks havoc on us. And sometimes we feel like we're out of control, that we don't have control over our emotions. We don't have control over a bunch of things in our life. And if you are in that time of life where you're growing really fast, like at night, you grow and your body heals. Okay. And sometimes you sleep longer periods of time because your body's growing even more. Okay. And you're also learning more at this time of life. Okay. More than, just your addition and subtraction, and learning how to read. You're learning harder things. And so your brain needs a little more rest. And so you're sleeping a little bit longer. Okay. And our body needs that to grow. Okay. And sometimes, we're going through that and our hormones get imbalanced also. And sometimes our emotions are out of whack. And sometimes you feel like you have no control over your emotions. This is where we really need to take time for prayer and need to sometimes do some just little exercises like take a deep breath and let it out slowly, count to 5 and think about something. Think about, is this really a big deal? Is this something for me to really be upset about? And just really relax. And sometimes we get upset over the dumbest things. And later on, at the moment, it seems like the biggest, horrible, most horrible thing in the world to us. And then a little while later, after you calm down, you realize it really wasn't that big of a deal. And sometimes your parents are telling you that, it's not that big of a deal. This is really not that important. It's nothing to get upset about. And at the moment, we feel like it's something big to get upset about. And this is time when maybe it's best to, say, excuse me, I need to be by myself for just a moment and just take time to breathe, take time to pray, and relax for just a minute, relax your body. Maybe have a good cry if you need to, or, scream into your pillow for a moment, just to let it out, and then just relax for a second and then realize, it's my glands, these hormones that are triggering just horrible responses from me. And it's usually not how you would typically react. At home, we feel a little bit more comfortable of real, saying things or doing things that we might not do out in public. And it's because we feel a little bit more relaxed. And so sometimes we take it out on our siblings or our parents. And we need to realize that they have feelings too, and they get hurt by the things we say. And sometimes saying you're sorry afterwards is not good enough. It's time to work on how we're reacting. And sometimes you just need to say, excuse me for just a minute, and just go take a breath and just pray. Maybe, like I say, take a good cry or something, and then come back and respond a little bit better. And this is a time where there's a lot of hormones reacting in our body. And there's also a lot of adrenaline rushing through our body. Okay. And another name for that is epinephrine. And these are hormones that are that are released in the neurotransmitters, and these give us that flight or fight or flight response. Who can tell me what that means? And if you want to come on mic, you can. Let me put the microphone on. Let me see. Select all and microphone. Give everybody the microphone if you would like to come on. Does anybody want to tell us what the fight or flight response is, or give an example of it? You can write it down if you want, if you don't want to talk out loud. I know sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to do that.
The fight or flight response is the instinct to, when confronted with a dangerous situation, either stay and fight for whatever it is that is being threatened, or to go away and leave.
Okay. How many of you have a response? Okay, I'm going to tell you that one of the things I do is like I've watched movies where there's some sort of surprise, and the first thing that happens is my arms go flying out, you know. I don't know, it's just like my first response, and I get scared and I go, "Oh," you know, and my arms go flying out. Maybe you have a response that you do. Does anyone have a response? Maybe you scream, maybe you run. Yes, okay. She says somebody scares us, we jerk in fright. And yeah, it's a response. Okay, you jump. Okay. I don't know what I was watching. I was watching something with my daughter, and there was something that just jumped out at us. And we were in the movie theater, and I threw my popcorn and I flung my arms up and I smacked my daughter right in the head. And I didn't mean to, but it's just that was just my typical response. You know, it's I get scared and my arms go flying out. Yeah, I know. I didn't mean to do that, but we all got a good laugh at it afterwards. But, you know, it's like each one of us has different reactions. And yeah, it's the first thing if somebody scares me, you know, I don't hear them walking up behind me and all of a sudden they'll say something. My son is good at that. He could be like a ninja, you know, he just kind of sneaks into the house and walks up behind me and all of a sudden, and he's tall too. He's like 6'7", and he'll reach into my ear and go, "Mom," you know, and my hands just go flying and he knows to move back. But you know, it's just that that's my first response. And some of you might have a response if somebody scares you. You might, hit them. Your fists come up. You know, you kick or you jump or run. You know, we all have different responses. And sometimes watching videos of people who get scared is kind of funny because it gives you a good laugh. But you see what people's response is. Some people just go crazy and try to run and push people down to get away. And, like if you watch people go through like haunted houses or different things like that, you see how they react when they get scared. And, I always wonder, how would I act if somebody, was hurtful, came into my house and tried to, scare me. I mean, I might just hurt them, just by accident. My kids know to back up when I get scared. They think it's funny. But, each one of us has different ways that we react. Do you ever scare your pet and see how they react? You see the response that they give. Okay, so Kay says you straighten up and look for whatever scared you and stare at it. Yeah, we all have these different responses. And that's the adrenaline. And your heart starts racing. And sometimes, you get really warm, your body changes really quick because of that. Now let's talk about your thyroid. If you can feel right over here on your throat, you can feel your thyroid. It's kind of like a butterfly shaped gland, and this controls a lot of things about us. It controls our metabolism, and it changes, it's like our heart rate, the way we, how much food we eat, and then how everything reacts with us. If we have a fast metabolism, people who have like so much energy, they talk a mile a minute, they can zip around and they're always like moving. You've seen people like that are just like crazy. They're like squirrels, they're just like everywhere all at once. And then you see people who are very slow and very responsive. That's another type of metabolism, a slow metabolism. But it also affects, how food reacts in our body. You see people who are like super skinny and always moving, their metabolism, that food goes right through them, and it gives them so much energy right away. Okay. And then some people, you can see they put on the pounds because their metabolism is very, very slow, and they can't seem to get off the weight because their metabolism is off. And so sometimes, when we're like that, we can actually get our thyroid taken care of by an endocrinologist, and they can see if our metabolism is right by checking our blood levels with our thyroid and see if that is off. And there's a lot of things that deal with that. And so our thyroid is can be affected by the foods that we eat. Um, yes, and it can change the way we feel about ourselves too. So that's one of those things that as you get older, you can have checked to see if it's working correctly. And that's one of the biggest problems of people, is having their thyroid being off. We also talked about your pancreas produces insulin, and people whose in their blood sugar does not regulate might need to take insulin. They might have diabetes, and so they would have to take extra insulin through an injector, or some form of they're doing different ways of doing it. I think through an inhaler now, where they can get their extra insulin if you're too afraid of shots. Or changing your diet and making sure that you have more carbs instead of more things that have sugar. So, watching the labels of what you eat to regulate that blood sugar. So, insulin is where the sugar enters into the cell and it's used as energy. So, if that sugar is off, it can do all sorts of horrible things to your body, make you feel like you're just not doing anything right, can cause you to faint. It can cause you to not feel good after you eat, make your eyesight really bad. It can actually cause diabetes, can cause you to lose parts of your body. Like your especially your feet. If you have really bad diabetes, they might have to amputate some of your like your feet or your legs, because it causes so many issues. And so there's a lot of problems that can happen when we have if you have diabetes, but making sure that insulin is regulated. So if you ever feel off and off for a long time. Yes. Yeah, so your great grandfather had a missing a foot from diabetes. Yes, it can cause problems with your balance and different things like that. So if you ever feel like your body just doesn't feel right for a long period of time, that's when you need to every once in a while we feel off. But if it's something constant, that's when we need to talk um, to our parents and say, I just don't feel right, and let a doctor check just to make sure. Is it your thyroid, is it your pancreas, or something like that. And a lot of times when we're teenagers, we're going through the our changing in our body, we have a lot of off days, but sometimes it's just your emotions. But if you're feeling not right, your body doesn't feel right, those are times to get those things checked, because we have a lot of hormones that are released during this time. And these are areas where we have hormones being released, all these different organs right here. And hormones are, in your as a teenager, you have hormones being released all over, and sometimes extra hormones. This is what causes like acne and all sorts of wonderful things on your body at this time. And so their hormones go through your bloodstream, and they affect different cells and tissues, and they affect all different things like your growth rate. Now your growth rate can also be influenced by your diet, and you do like even like pollution, or like if you've got contaminated water would change that. But if you have a good diet and good clean air and water, no pollution around you, your growth rate might be really good. Like you could grow even taller than you would, than you're like you are predestined, in your DNA to be a certain height. But if you're not eating properly, you might be even shorter than what your DNA has already determined what you should be. The way God is intended you to be. And so we think about all these different things, and look at the last one, mood. Okay. And during this time, your teenage years, we get an attitude. I remember I was always a very obedient child. I was so shy and very obedient. I never wanted to, cause my parents any grief. I was the oldest child and I always did what I was supposed to do. But I would get just so sad and, kind of moody, and, and didn't know why, and I didn't really have an attitude where I would talk back to my parents or anything like that. But I would just get like deeper inside of me, and I would still do things, but it would show on my face that I had an attitude. And so during this time, you might see that you have, like your attitude changes, okay, and not for the better. And sometimes, your parents will ask you, what's your problem? Yes, I love that one, Caden. The white whale of teenage afflictions. Yes. Your parents might ask you, what's your problem? Or you have your younger brothers and sisters, they might say, they're always being mean. And maybe you've heard that. I know my kids used to say that about each other. They're being mean to me, or you got an attitude, and so this is the biggest thing. But look at all these different areas in your body that have hormones and how they affect you. Your body is just releasing excess hormones into you, and so it really does affect you. Even the best kids in the world have issues with this, so don't feel like you're alone. In fact, it helps to talk to somebody, and sometimes we don't want to talk to our parents during this time. And being homeschooled, sometimes that they're the only ones around. Being able to talk to your parents is a good thing, and saying, hey, I don't understand what's going on. I just feel angry all the time, or I feel sad all the time, or, my emotions are up and down. One minute I'm laughing, and the next minute I'm crying, and I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm going crazy. And sometimes it helps to talk to a friend. And realizing that is really important, because this is part of what we call puberty. And this is where you're turning into an adult. Okay. And it takes a while. In fact, our bodies are not fully grown until you're about 25. And you think about it, oh, when I'm 18, I'll be an adult. Okay. Yeah. By law, you are an adult. But by bodily standards, the way God has designed you, your brain is still growing until you're 25. Sometimes parts of our body are still growing, like our feet, growth wise. Okay. As far as height. Okay. Weight can change. Okay. We can grow wider this way, but growing this way taller is different. Okay. During your teenage years, up until you're about 25, you can still keep growing physically taller. Your arms will get longer, your legs, your feet. Typically, guys, your feet will stop growing about the age of 20 to 22. Girls around 18, 16 to 18. Okay. But your brains are still growing until you're about 25. They used to say that girls would their brains would stop growing around 22, and they'd be a little bit more mature by then. But now they're saying still around 25. So they'd say, yeah, they used to say it took a little longer for guys, but it's about the same for both of you. And so it changes like our muscle mass and density. So you can, guys, this is like the prime of your life when you grow those muscles, and you can be the strongest and your fittest during this time period. And you're growing muscle mass all over your body, your legs getting stronger, your arms, if you're bodybuilding, this is that time where you have a lot of testosterone, and you're growing all like all over, and there during this time we see like hair growth. Your head is finished growing, so you got more of an adult head. You put your head next to your parents and look in the mirror and realize, my head has to grow a lot yet. Your body might be growing, but your head still hasn't finished growing all the way. And you start growing facial hair, and men start growing facial hair. You start growing hair in your armpits, and all over your body. You start growing hair, and you start changing. Your body starts changing in all different ways. Your bone structure changes a little bit during this time. Your bones are kind of going into that adult stage. And so you're seeing that your body is changing in huge ways. Look at somebody who's about 10 or 12 years old and an adult, and see how much of a change there is during this time period. It is amazing. Okay, so this is why there's so much going on in your body and so many hormones that are raging. It's changing so fast. And if you find that your sleep pattern has changed, and you're staying up till 11, 12 o'clock at night and 1 o'clock at night, you can't go to sleep, your brain is just wired. Okay. You might see that as you finish going through this time period, that your sleep cycle goes back down to a normal time period. you'll see that it changes because that's how our bodies are designed to be tired when it's dark outside, right? And so you'll notice that as you finish going through these growth periods, that everything will change back to somewhat normal. All right, we're gonna go play our Kahoot game. So if you haven't gone to that, it's right at the very top of our chat. I can't remember what the pin number was, but let me see. Oh, I see a couple of you are already in there. So we'll go over here to our screen and let's see, 367502. 367502. And while you guys are going there, let me remind you, thank you, Caden, for putting that in the chat. During your homework this week, at the very bottom of we have a couple different videos to watch. Healthy conflict resolution. That's a good one to watch. And then how to shake hands like a gentleman. I love this. My husband teaches in the public school, and that's one of the things that he really does with each of the little boys as they're coming through classes. He teaches elementary and middle school, is when they're coming in, shakes their hands, and he tells the young men how to shake their hand like a gentleman. A lot of them don't have fathers with them, so this is a good video. And then we're going to have an assessment, and that's down here at the bottom. And so I always put our tests at the very bottom. And I'm not positive. I'll tell you later if you have just one chance to take that. So I'll check that afterwards here. All right, looks like most of us are in here. All right, let's play our game and let's see how well we do today. So we are in week 4. And I can't remember how many questions we have. I did a lot there. 15. Can clutter cause anxiety? Yes in red, no in blue. Yes, it can. I know it causes anxiety in me. I just get a little flustered. I like things nice and neat before I go to bed at night. All right, Jake's in the lead. Number 2, true or false? Stress can trigger physical pain. Is that true in blue or is that false in red? Yes, that's true. It can cause physical pain. Stomach aches, headaches, different things like that, and even other physical pains, joint pains. Caden and Joanna moved on up. Number 3, true or false? Our facial expressions can indicate our mood. Is that true in blue or is that false in red? That is true. Yes, it can. Yeah, our facial expressions do show a lot, don't they? Number 4, the brain, spinal cord, and nerves make up the endocrine system in red, nervous system in blue, hypothalamus in yellow, or cerebellum in green. And it's the nervous system. Very good. Okay, so all right, Joanna moved on up. Number 5, true or false? Neurons are also called nerve cells. Is that true in blue or is that false in red? And that is true. Yes, that is true. Okay. Oh, well, look at that. Caden, everybody moved on up. Caden, Joanna, Carly, Susanna, and Victory. And Caden is in the lead. You guys are also close. True or false? Most neuron cells reproduce. Is that true in blue or is that false in red? And that is false. Neuron cells do not reproduce. Okay. All right. Jake moved on up. Number 7, true or false? You are born with all the neuron cells you will ever have. Is that true in blue or is that false in red? That is true. Yes, you are born with almost all of them. Yes. Isaiah moved on up. Number 8, blank primarily receive information from other neurons. Is that axons in red, cell bodies in blue, terminal shells in yellow, or dendrites, sorry, in green? Dendrites are something in the marine biology. And the correct answer is dendrites. Yes. All right. Very good. All right. So Susanna moved up to first place and Isaiah moved on up. Number 9, a blank nerve carries information in both directions. Is that a sensory nerve in red, mixed nerve in blue, or motor nerve in yellow? And the correct answer is mixed. Very good. Mixed. All right. Let's see how he did. Isaiah and Carly moved on up. Susanna's in the lead. Number 10. Blank nerves transmit information from the brain and spinal cord to the glands. Is that sensory nerves in red, motor nerves in blue, or mixed nerves in yellow? Transmit information from the brain and spinal cord to the glands. And that would be motor nerves, motor nerves. Okay, so Joanna moved on up. Number 11, an involuntary automatic body movement or response to a stimulus occurring without conscious thought. Is that a sensory receptor in red or is that a reflex in blue? Reflex, yes, something that we just do. Okay, you jump. Okay, Isaiah and Carly moved on up. Number 12, consists of all the nerves that branch out from the spinal cord and extend to the rest of the body. Is that your peripheral nervous system in red or the central nervous system in blue? All the nerves that branch out from the spinal cord and extend to the rest of the body. That's the peripheral nervous system. Okay. All right. So Joanna moved on up. Number 13. How much of our blood goes through our brain? Is that 10% in red, 20% in blue, 30% in yellow, or 40% in green? How much blood goes through our brain? And that would be 20%. Very good. All right. And let's go on to number 14. True or false? The largest part of our brain is the cerebellum. Is that true in blue or is that false in red? And that is actually false. It's the cerebrum. All right, so it was close, close, but not quite the same one. All right, Victory moved on up. Last question, number 15, regulates the sleep wake cycle. Is that serotonin in red or melatonin in blue? And that would be melatonin. And that's why I wanted to finish our slides from last week. Excellent job. All right, let's see how we did here. In third place, we have Isaiah. Excellent job. All right. In second place, we have Caden. Wonderful. And in first place, we have, let's see, Susanna. Amazing. All right. Good job, guys. That was awesome. Okay. Let's go on back to our class. Oh, all right. Let's see. Let me get our slides back up here. And let me just check on our test here real quick here because I want to make sure that I give you good information on that one and I can see it and you guys can't. So let's see. No, you have one time to take our test and you have 60 minutes to take it. Okay. And it's not open book, but it is helpful to look at your neck or your neck, your notes. Okay. Um, Serotonin. Okay, so let's go back over here. Um, right over here. Okay, so serotonin helps regulate the duration and time of your sleep, and melatonin is regulating your sleep wake cycle. Okay, so how long you're awake and sleeping, and serotonin actually regulates how well you sleep and how long you sleep. So serotonin is more for nighttime sleeping and how long you're going to sleep. Melatonin regulates the sleep wake cycle. How many questions are on the test? Let me go. Oh, yeah, let me bring this here. Let me go check. Um, I can check here. Let me see. There are 12 questions. One, two, yeah, 12 questions, and one is matching. Um, so when you're doing a matching question, and any of your questions, if you don't know the answer, at least take a good guess. Okay. Don't leave something blank. All right. Because if you leave it blank, you got a zero on it. So if you take a good guess, you'll at least maybe get it right. And the same thing with matching. Do the ones that you know, and the ones that you're not sure of, then whatever's left over, you can kind of get a good guess. You can keep a piece of paper next to you, so you can write down what's left over or something, if you need that. But no open notes or open book for the test. Okay. Any other questions on tests? Yes, yeah, the notes that provide that are in our class, those are our notes. No, week 1 was just kind of an overview of what we did. So, when you're looking at, the rest of the modules, basically week 2 and 3 is what we've covered, and then today. So, anything that we covered today in class. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, very good. Yes, Susanna, that's very good. Like it regulates the routine melatonin. All right. Yes. All right. So let's talk about consciousness. And every time I look at this word, I think about how I used to spell it, consciousness. Is basically, you think about, your body is in three parts. Your no, no notes, no book for the test. Okay, just your head. All right. So, your consciousness is kind of like your body's in three parts: your body, soul, and spirit. Your soul is a part of you that lives forever, but your spirit is kind of like who you are. You got your body, but if something were to happen to you, and your body was just laying there, and you didn't have consciousness, it would just be your body there. Okay, that your like your character, your thoughts, kind of like who you are, your attitude, that is part of your consciousness. Okay. So this is all affected in your cerebral cortex, and it helps you with your thoughts and actions. So this is a part of our brain that helps us think and act. Now, we can actually check our brain and the electrical activity that's in our brain with something called an EEG, which is an electroencephalogram. Okay, that's kind of a tough one to say. It's easier to say EEG. Okay, and this is a type of test that can measure your brain activity. So, yeah, you might have had one just to see, like maybe if you've had an accident, just to see how well your brain is functioning. Last week, I don't know if I mentioned this in this class. Um, yeah, it is pretty cool. Last week, my daughter, or 2 weeks ago, my daughter fell off her horse, and it was kind of a dumb thing. She rides in a rodeo, and she still can't remember this. She had amnesia, and she still can't remember this, but she thought she might have been riding in the rodeo, but she was just at home practicing lunges, and she was practicing with, a gentleman who helps her ride, and the horse just decided it didn't wanna do anything and just stood there and then sat down, and she slid off the back, and she must have hit her head. She was a little sore, but she always wears her helmet no matter what she does, which is a smart thing to do. And she just got up and went about her business and drove home, and she came home crying, and she says, "I can't remember anything." She was like, "Can't remember what day it is, and I can't remember what month it is. I can't remember what I just did." And so we took her to the hospital, and they did an EEG just to check to see her brain activity. They did a CT scan, found out that there was nothing wrong, but she just hit her head, and she still can't remember that Saturday. Which is kind of strange. She just can't remember anything. She can't remember being in the hospital or anything else. So sometimes we might have it, after you've had an accident. Sometimes older people will have it just to check to see like where their brain is being active if they're having problems with remembering things, and different, all sorts of stuff like that, or having trouble moving certain parts of their body, different things like that. They might have an EEG just to see where the brain activity is. It is really kind of a neat type of a test that they can do. They can do all different kinds of tests on our body that are just amazing. So, there are neurons that derive their energy from glucose. Okay, so where do we get glucose from? Where are we going to get that sugar molecule in our blood system? Okay, so from our food. It can happen in different ways. Okay, Susanna. So, those we'll talk about that in just a minute. In just a minute, but yeah, that can happen with mental illness or other diseases like that. White bread, candies, but think about our pancreas. Remember, our pancreas is making that insulin and that glucose, and it's sending it out to our bodies. Okay, so you think about that. We just talked about that one. So that glucose goes out to our body, and it helps our brain function. It gets our brains actually doing those synapses, and so it allows that brain activity to actually work. Okay, this is a good time for us to take a break. You asked a question about our um, our pancreas and the insulin, and that is actually regulated by our liver also. So we can see that insulin is regulated through our pancreas, and our liver regulates the glucose. So there's a lot of body parts, different organs that are part of this entire system and allow the different nutrients to get to different parts of our body. So it is really amazing what we can do. All right, so we read a little bit about brain reserve. Brain reserve. How much fuel is in your brain, really? And there's a lot that goes into that. Okay, so this is part of your lifelong um how do I put that? It's just constantly in your life. From the moment you're born to the moment you die, you're going to be using your brain. Okay. And you see a lot of older people who have like dementia and have different memory problems. I'm having memory problems right now, trying to remember the right words to say. And a lot of that has to do with maybe different illnesses that we might have, maybe even throughout our life, different things that we can contribute to, like exercise and proper diet, can actually work into some of that. So, all like Alzheimer's, they're finding that some of these things might be contributed to different things in our body. Sometimes they're saying even like our dental care, to how we take good care of our teeth, can be related to Alzheimer's. So I thought that was kind of a neat study I read, that, like flossing and taking good care, because sometimes the bacteria that builds up in our mouth can lead to problems in our brain. So I was like, "Oh, that was interesting." So there's a lot that goes into this, and it it really does. There's so much that gets into this. If we misuse our body, drugs, alcohol, smoking, different things like that, that can reduce our brain reserve, because we're killing brain cells by doing some of those things. Certain things that we put into our body, even like, okay, and I know this is a harsh one here, with a lot of Christians, is even like tattoos. And you go, what does tattoos have to do with our brain? The ink that goes into that gets into our bloodstream and can cause a lot of problems with our brain. And it doesn't go away. It gets into our bloodstream, and it just doesn't go away. And so different things like that, we can see how, like how the Bible tells us that our body is a temple, and how we treat our body really does affect our brain. And you think about that. If you're treating your body well, trying to take good care of yourself, eating healthy and exercising, moving around, even having the right attitude, that emotional um, part of us. It really does affect every part of us. And so that's what we have to remember here. So when we're eating properly for our brain health, having a lot of protein is essential. And we get protein through like fish and meat, eggs, seeds, nuts, and have a lot of protein. And then a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. So good fats. There are good fats and bad fats. Like, like fried foods are not always as good for us, even though they taste good. Okay. We went to the fair the other day, and you could just smell the grease. My husband was saying, he goes, I like greasy food. He says, but that's all he can smell is the grease. And we had some fried pickles, and but it's like they have fried vegetables and fried chicken and fried this and fried that. Everything is fried, deep fried, corn dogs and deep fried candy bars and Twinkies, and everything that even wasn't good for you, like your fruits and vegetables fried. But they have things that are like candy bars and Twinkies and Oreos fried. So, those things, are not good fats for us. Okay. Fats that are solid at room temperature typically are not good for us. Okay. We went through the phase where my coconut oil is good for you, and olive oil, that's good for you. But when it gets cold, it gets to be a solid. So we just got into, over the summer, my coconut oil was liquid at room temperature. I have a jar of it, and the past few days, in the past few nights, it's been in the 40s at night, and during in the day, it's been in the high 60s, and it became solid again. But that's a good fat for you. But typically, most fats that are a solid at room temperature are not good for you. And so we look at different types of fats that are good for us. Fish is a good source of fat. Can you guys think of anything else that's a good source of fat for you? Yeah. All right, nuts. Yes, avocados, butter. Yeah, real butter, not margarine. Margarine is really not good for us, but real butter is actually good for you. Coconuts and coconut oil, that's good for you. Alligator pears. Oh, I've never heard of those. That would be interesting. But there's all sorts of chia seeds, soybeans. Now, I will say, if you have problems with your thyroid, you should not have soy products because it messes with your hormones. So a lot of soy products mess with your hormones, and maybe most people don't realize that. Yeah, fish is probably one of the best source of fats. Alligator pears and avocados are the same thing. Okay, I love avocados. Okay, I just I just bought more avocados. We usually have avocado toast, and I mix it in with our salads and different things like that. Um, so I am a big person who loves avocados. Um, it depends on the oil, Susanna. Okay. So like olive oil is a really good oil to use in your cooking. Okay. And for your foods. Um, Canola oil is not so good, and your corn oil, and like even some of the seed oils, like my daughter's really big into seed oils and knowing what's inside of your foods. So it affects them in different ways. I know you think that it wouldn't, but it does affect them in certain ways. And it depends on how, I guess, how maybe how it's cooked. But if you have thyroid issues, you really should stay away from soy products. And soy products can be in all sorts of things, even like our hair care and different things like that. So it just depends on like how you're doing physically. Um, yeah, a lot of fried foods have a lot of fats that aren't good for us because of the oils that they cook them in. So that's where we have to be really careful. And knowing the types of oils that are good, if you like, there are some certain oils that are better to cook in than others. Yes, yeah, that's really good, good for you. All right. And then self-care. Self-care is important. It's important for our brain reserve too. Okay. Taking good care of yourself. Sometimes we need to be alone. Maybe you're one of those type of people that you get a lot of care for yourself by being alone a little bit. Now, being alone all the time is not good for us, but sometimes we need a little bit of alone time. Lots of sleep. You should get at least 8 hours of sleep every night. And sometimes as teenagers, we want to sleep even more than that, and that's fine during this time of your life. But we shouldn't make it a habit of 10, 12 hours of sleep and then wake up and do nothing, right? No, sometimes look at there, talking to yourself. Okay, talk to yourself. I do that all the time. especially when I'm driving. Yesterday, I had to drive an hour away to a doctor, and I'm sitting in the car just talking to myself, talking to God and praying. And sometimes that's good. Okay, just as long as you're not arguing with yourself, I guess. Get outside, get some sunshine, read. That's good for our brain. And sometimes it's good to just relax you, just to read a story. Keeping things tidy. Um, Getting a hug. Now, they say a hug is really important for our emotional health. And they say your hug should last about 20 seconds. And so I've made sure that that like my husband, when he comes home from work, that I give him an extra long hug. And sometimes he's like, "Are you done hugging?" And I'm like, "No, you need a little bit longer." And you could feel him just relax. I mean, like I could feel him just kind of relax after a long hug. And then he's a little happier, okay, because he gets tired after a long day of work. Talking to your friends. Gardening. I love to garden. And it's not just a hobby. Think, oh, you like to garden, it's a hobby. But being in the dirt, there are chemicals that are released in the dirt that actually help you to calm down. So, it really does affect us being in the dirt and actually getting dirt on our hands. Cooking, sometimes just, getting in the kitchen and doing some cooking, playing a game, but be very careful with playing games, and how long you play video games. Playing a board game would be good. Okay. That would be a little bit better for you. So, yeah, all right, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it releases a chemical in our body when you give them a longer hug. There was a lady that I knew, and we used to homeschool, and she'd come in for a hug, and you'd try to pull away. One of those, you're hugging way too long, and you try to pull away, and she's still hugging. And she liked to hug for at least a minute, so I think she would count it out. Yeah, there are chemicals in plants, but there's chemicals in dirt that are released, different enzymes that are released, and they actually get into our skin, and it really does calm you down. A lot of fun there. And eating healthy. You might not think, oh, I want some, cookies or ice cream. And I love ice cream. I love chocolate, but making sure that we don't eat that. That shouldn't be the main portion of what we eat. And so eating a little bit more healthier and getting enough sleep is really important. Water. If you feel hungry, sometimes your body is just really thirsty. So drinking a glass of water and still thinking, am I still hungry? Am I just eating to eat, or am I eating because I'm actually hungry, or was I just thirsty? And then, exercising. We need to get up and move around, especially, when you're in school, you're doing a lot of things, get outside and ride your bicycle or walk your dog. Um, Let me see. Longest hug. Yeah. When you do go outside and you're riding your bicycle or a motorbike or anything, make sure that you do wear a helmet. Okay. I remember when I was growing up, the geeky kid was the one wearing the helmet. But nowadays, they make some cool helmets, and it is important, especially after my daughter fell and I realized, how easily you can get, a, a brain injury, and it can cause a lot of problems. Um, Getting in God's word and praying is the biggest, a big, big, big thing. Be careful of your thoughts. What are you reading? What are you watching on TV? What kind of music are you listening to? A lot of times before we watch a movie, we'll look up the movie and put parents guide next to it and take a look at what the movie is. What kind of scenes are they showing? What kind of language do they have? That is so important. If you're listening to people swearing all the time, soon, you listen to it and it's in your head. And we have to be careful of that. We need to be careful the type of music we listen to. Those are some things. You're listening to those words, and those words mean a lot. They start getting into our brain. And so we have to be careful with that. And sometimes we think I was listening to the I had listened to a Christian talk show host, and he was talking about with a gentleman, and he was saying when he was a teenager, he just didn't want to listen to what his parents said, and he said he thought he knew best, and he said the music that he listened to really did affect a lot of his attitude and what happened in his life. And he said he wished he'd listened to his parents at the time. And a lot of times when we're teenagers, we think we know best. We're trying to be adults and we're not quite adults yet. And yes, that, yeah, images stick in our heads too. Yes. And especially when we're taking a look at different things in our lives, those images and that music, those lyrics, the words stick in our heads, and they repeat themselves constantly. When you get what they call an earworm, that's kind of when like a musical tune keeps playing over and over in your head. They tend to bother you. Um, I'm not sure who Ralph Stanley is, but I'd have to look him up. But we have to be careful. What kind of language do they have? And that's really important. What we're listening to. Um, and I think that people who use, and it really bothers me when people use like the F word, and it's just constant. And I think that they don't have the intelligence to use words that will describe what they need to. Bluegrass music, yeah. All right. So yeah, we just have to be careful of people who are using types of language that is very inappropriate. So this is where we have to be wise. Now when your body is dehydrated, we start to lose some of our brain function also. In the summertime, when you start panting a little bit, and you're hot and you're sweating a lot, you need extra water, and sometimes electrolytes in your water. So like a little extra salt in the water, because it helps your body retain the water. Do you ever notice that, like, I can't think of the name of the types of electrolytes. So, those drinks like Gatorade type drinks. They've got so many different types of them nowadays. But they taste a little salty, and that's because there is salt in them, and that salt, it helps our body to retain the water. And if you're outside working for a long period of time and you've been sweating a lot, if you get super dehydrated, you could become to the point where you don't know what's going on. You get dizzy, lightheaded, and it can even lead to death if you get too dehydrated. So you can actually get into the hospital, and it can cause a lot of problems. So you want to make sure that you're drinking plenty of water. You need to really be careful with that one. And that can happen any time of the year. So always keep, water around when you're doing activities. Now, this is something that I think we all deal with, is regretful memories, things that we regret. And sometimes feelings like being sad, like overly sad. Sometimes we feel sad about something, and then it goes away, like, oh, that's sad, but having over like overtly sadness and guilt about something that we've done, shame, disappointment, these things, sometimes we dwell on these things, and yeah, it can distract us, and it can actually like overtake a lot of our thoughts. This is where we really have to work hard at saying, like, this is what, and we all deal with this. And I remember talking with each of my children about things like this. And I tell them, one of the things I do is just pray to God and say, God, help me, help this me to stop thinking about this. And you have to find ways to distract yourself, maybe singing, a Bible song, or remembering a Bible verse, or doing something else, to get your thoughts on something other than that. And we all have times that we have done, things that we regret, or we're ashamed of. We all do. None of us are perfect. Sometimes we have to learn to forgive ourselves and say, God, please forgive me for this, and say what it was, and then put it behind you. If you've we pay the price for just certain things, and sometimes we're never going to forget certain things, but we can learn to put it behind us and realize that that does not determine who we are. And especially now as teenagers, sometimes we do stupid things, right? My father-in-law used to say, "Stupid people do stupid things," and so we do dumb things. We do things that we regret, and there's always going to be something, and it's always going to pop up in your head even when you're older. But you have to learn to break that cycle of negative thinking. So doing things that will help you get rid of that, praying, saying a Bible verse, singing a song, reading, getting your mind off of that, talking to somebody and saying, hey, this keeps coming up. Pray with me about this. You don't have to say what's coming up, but just tell them, say, hey, I have these thoughts that just keep popping up and I can't stop thinking about them. And find ways that we can get rid of those persistent thoughts. And so that's really important in our lives too. um, this one's a good one. Okay, take breaks. You guys are studying really hard right now, and you're going to be some of you might be going to college, and you're going to study really hard. Learning how to take breaks throughout the day, so you don't get burnt out. Learning how to sit down. I've had to learn how to do that a lot lately, and that's because and I've mentioned, like, I'm going to have back surgery. I can't stand and do things for more than like 10 minutes. I have to sit down. So I've had to learn to take breaks. I've had to learn how to let other people do things for me. And it's so against me, because I'm just a busy person. And I've had to learn how to say no. I can't do different things. I can't carry out the laundry for myself out to, hang it up. I can't pick up pots and pans. I can't do a lot of things that I normally would do. I can't pick up heavy things. So I have to learn to say no. You have to learn to say no. You can't say yes to everything. You can't let people guilt you into saying yes. Sometimes people guilt you into, oh, you have to do this, and you have to learn to say no for your own mental health. You have to take breaks when you're doing different things. If you're studying, I always told my kids 30 minutes and then take a break for 5 minutes, or change subjects. And when I say take a break for 5 minutes, don't go off for an hour and go play or play a video game, or go read a novel or something, or go off and play basketball or something like that for an hour. Just take a 5-minute break, just to get a glass of water or something, or get up off your seat, and then change subjects. Because if you focus on one subject constantly and don't take any breaks, your brain starts slowing down after about a half an hour, and so your brain power starts slowing down. um this is a good one. Practice gratitude, learning how to say thank you. And that can actually boost your mood quite a bit. Forgive yourself. That's a big one. Learning how to forgive yourself for maybe something you said or did. Learn from your mistakes. Learn how to say, I'm sorry. And go to God and say, I'm sorry, I did. And then say what you did. Go to that person that you did something to and say, I am sorry that I said that, or I'm sorry I did that. Um, and most of the time they will forgive you. Okay. Because everybody knows we make mistakes. And when somebody comes to you and says, I'm sorry, forgive them, because they made a mistake too. Okay, even grown-ups, even your parents make mistakes, and they need to come to you and apologize too for the mistakes that they make, for getting angry or something. I do that to my kids. I apologize to them if I've been short with them. Um, or, like, you do something stupid. We all do that. And then when you start, finding that, you're learning how to do those different things, congratulate yourself. That's important. And we need to protect our brain. Our brain is, yeah, it is fragile. And once again, sleep, diet, exercise, all these things help with our mental activity. How hard do you work at something? Sometimes, maybe you work really hard. Let's say math is maybe one of your hard things, and maybe you're struggling with that. Or maybe you're struggling with grammar or different things at home, in your other studies, and you have to work a little harder on those things. Um, Learning to like engage your brain in different activities that will help you and encourage you when you get something right. Sometimes getting things wrong and learning from our mistakes is really important. Um, and then, making sure that you wear a helmet if you're doing any type of activity that can cause your brain any harm. So we need to exercise our brain and we need to protect our brain. Um, and now the Bible tells us that there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. You're learning knowledge right now. You're gaining information and facts, but applying that is wisdom, and it uses that knowledge. So wisdom is using the knowledge that you have, and the Bible gives us wisdom. There's a lot of things in the Bible that are wise that may seem opposite of what the world thinks. And we need to learn that wisdom from God. That is so important. So, listening in church and learning from the different things that you read in the Bible, so important. Proverbs 2:6, for the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. Proverbs 9:10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. James 3:13, who among you is wise and understanding? So, wisdom really comes from God. Being able to use the knowledge that you have in ways using it in your life, but understanding that the God's way of doing things may be opposite of the way the world says to do things. And that is wisdom. That is where you're getting your wisdom. Wisdom comes from God. All right, the human brain, and a lot of you did this really well in your homework, is not really meant for multitasking. Okay, for the most part, we can't. Very few people can multitask somewhat well, but we can't do our best when we multitask. So, learning how to do things well, um, learning how to do one thing well at a time is a little bit better, and it actually saves you more time. Do you ever watch maybe your mom homeschooling you and trying to make dinner and trying to, talk on the phone or write a list, and maybe she gets confused and forgets things, and you see how frustrated she becomes by doing a bunch of different things. You're sitting there doing your work, and maybe you have siblings doing their schoolwork, and she's going from one person to the next and trying to do laundry and get dinner ready and all these things all at once, and she gets flustered and she forgets what she's doing and she's not doing any of them well, right? And maybe you're the same way. You see that. Multitasking, really, our brains aren't wired for doing that, and so learning how to do that well is kind of hard. It takes our attention span, where our attention should be on like one thing at a time. Your attention span when you're talking to somebody, you're learning to concentrate on that person while they're talking, looking them in the eye, working on one task at a time. If you're trying to talk to somebody and you're already thinking of a response, you're trying to multitask, learning to listen to a person first. Or if you're trying to concentrate on a task and then another task comes along, you can't put your concentration on all those. In fact, our average human's attention span is about 8.25 seconds, which is less than a goldfish. A goldfish can keep its attention for 9 seconds. If you're using the internet, that's our attention span is really, really down. I noticed that my attention span isn't that great, because I scroll on my phone and scrolling through like Facebook or Instagram or something like that. And I'm constantly scrolling. So I'm looking at a million things all at once, and then my husband will start talking to me and my attention span is really short. So I have to learn to get off of those devices because they ruin your attention span. And so we can see the attention span of some of us. It's not very long, just a few seconds at a time. This is why it's really hard for some of us to sit through maybe our class or maybe through a preacher's sermon or different things, because the internet really ruins that. It like wires our brain differently, and we have to be really careful of that. Distractions, and those distractions can become like our telephone and our cell phone, and scrolling through a million things, whether it's messages or different types of social media. They ruin our attention span and they distract us, and we have to be really careful. Learning how to think about our body and what distracts us. Sometimes hunger can distract us. If we're tired, sometimes being sick can distract us. If we're worrying about different things, yeah, social media and games can really distract us and make us not be able to pay attention. We were watching a movie the other night, and everybody had their cell phones out, and we were all looking at different things while we were watching a movie. And I finally said, "Are we watching this movie or are we all on our cell phones?" And we all just put them down, because we can't do that. Yeah. And so we have to be careful. What's distracting us? Now, ADD and ADHD are two different things that can cause us to not pay attention. They're people who are easily distracted with their thoughts, and they struggle with new information. And sometimes we think that we have it, but there are people who really, really have it, and it's bad. Okay. Sometimes we might have just a small amount of that, and that's kind of normal. But if it becomes too much, then it can really be distracting. People who like lose things constantly, it takes a lot of mental energy just to get a task done, and they can't gather new information. This might be somebody who's really having trouble with this. And sometimes there's medications they can take or exercises they can do to help them. Autism is another kind of disorder that causes the brain not to work as well, and it can affect a person's emotions or their intelligence, and sometimes they might be really good at one thing and can't function um, with anything else in their life, and they can't function like with friends, or being able to communicate with other people. They might be extremely awkward, but maybe they can do something really great, like play the piano without even ever having a lesson, and I mean like play it immaculately, just amazingly. So they can have something that they're like super good at, but the rest of like emotionally and socially, they can be extremely awkward at a lot of their different things. And maybe there are different spectrums of that, people who have just a little bit of that, and some of them who have a lot of that. So there we can be on what we call a spectrum, where you can have just a little bit, or up to a lot of it, to it's just on one extreme or the other. And learning how to um compensate for our different problems that we have. All of us might be dealing with different things in our lives. Um, and while we're learning how to do that, sometimes we end up depressed or having anxiety. Um, Learning how to manage that stress is really important. And as Christians, a lot of times, churches or Sunday school teachers and different things, they might tell you, "Oh, you should be happy all the time as a Christian." And we're not going to be happy all the time. We should have joy. Joy and happiness are different from each other. Happiness is due to outward conditions. Joy is something that comes from inside our heart. Okay. And you can still have joy and be depressed or anxious. Yes, the book of Job talks a lot about this. Yes, he went through a lot of troubles. But we, as Christians, yes, you can get depressed. You can get anxious. You can have problems with your mind. We're not going to be immune from those by being a Christian. You're not going to be immune from having mental issues. Okay. Yeah, the book of Psalms talks a lot about that. David went through depression and asked if God was even watching him, if God was even around, and if God even loved him. Okay. And we all feel like that sometimes. Okay. We will all feel like that. And God doesn't want us to be like that, but He knows through certain circumstances and things, we're all going to go through that in our life. We're all going to go through hard times, and that's normal. That's not something that just non-Christians have. So mental illness is called a mental health disorder, and there's a wide range of those different types of mental disorders. One of them is seasonal affective disorder, which is called SAD, and this is because there's not enough sunshine, and because of that, like especially in the wintertime when there's not enough sunlight, it does affect us. Sunlight is very important for our body to get enough vitamin D and vitamin K in our bodies. And if we don't have that, it can affect our mood and our sleep. And so it can affect us. Anxiety can cause that. And we can see that people who get anxious, worrying, fear, and significant fear and worry, and it can affect their daily life. And so these are different things that we see. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. A lot of people, say, "Oh, I have OCD," and but having that is something that's a little bit more severe than what most people say. This is like checking things to make sure they're done like over and over and over again. You're obsessed with it. Arranging things, sometimes hoarding things, asking for reassurance, repeating things constantly in your head. That would be OCD. Okay. And it's very severe. It's not just, oh, repeating something a couple times. It is just something that's severe and overtakes your thoughts completely. Um, um, they're about the same. So an illness is can be something that's more like an outside, like getting a germ or different things like that, or maybe something that can be like a something that's inherited, like a some sort of a physical disease that can be inherited, or something that maybe you have because of your genetic disorder, like your genes. But a disorder might be something more like in your brain. Okay, so yeah, like, that's very good. Illness is more physical and a disorder kind of mental. Yes. When we're thinking about that. So like in our brain. Okay. So panic. Some people have a panic disorder, which is kind of like an anxiety attack. And you might feel like your heart's pounding and you can't breathe. And sometimes you see spots in your head. You feel like or you're in your eyes and you feel like you're having a heart attack. And that would be more of a panic attack. Okay. And some people get those like one or two in their life. That doesn't mean that you have a disorder or anything, but it could just, happen. Like I've had it happen once or twice to me. For you know, just a weird thing like being in a car accident and having like a little panic attack, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to constantly have a panic, like an anxiety disorder. Just having it once or twice is not a disorder. And most people will have it once or twice. Yeah, some of those can be inherited. Yes. Phobias are fears. These are things that you can get in your life where you're just overwhelmed by irrational fears. And I know we're right at the end of class, so I'm just going to kind of go quickly. Bipolar disorders, um, borderline personality disorders. These are severe things that can happen to people. We'll talk about some of these maybe next week at the beginning of class. Schizophrenia, people who kind of have like multiple personalities that come out and they can't remember. Dementia, and Alzheimer's. These are disorders. These are things that can happen to you. So let me go right over here. Oh, somebody asked about, and I think it was Suzanne, and now I'm going to say it wrong, anoscosia. Okay, which is they can't even remember that they even have a disorder. They don't even realize that they're acting a certain way, so they can't even recognize their illness. And so that's kind of a disorder. That's where your brain can't even recognize that you're sick. It's other people having to tell you. Sometimes schizophrenia can be inherited. I love that. I wouldn't even be able to say that, Caden. It's a fear of long words. All right. Anything that let me see if there's anything in a lot of Bible verses here. And I'll see if there's anything that we need to, it is a real thing. Oh my goodness. All right. So I know there was a lot that we covered today. And there was nothing else that was underlined that of anything that we need to cover in class, but there's a lot of disorders out there. And if you feel like you're overwhelmed with something, it's best to talk to somebody. And if you can't talk to your parents, maybe talking to a Sunday school teacher or your pastor, or maybe a close friend, or even one of your friends' parents, and say, can I just talk to you? If you feel like you've got a trusted adult that you can talk to, it's good to do that. And sometimes there's even like phone lines with Christian counselors. You might listen to, like, on the Christian radio station. Sometimes there's phone lines where you can talk to somebody, a complete stranger, someone you don't even know, and they don't know you, and you can talk to them and just feel like you can open up your heart to it. And if you ever feel like you need to talk to even me, feel like you can do that and be able to, I see that, make, make sure, where you maybe gets just some reassurance that you are okay, and that what you're doing, what's happening is normal, and that you are going to be okay. And how do you get rid of these different things, these different thoughts and feelings, and learning how to forgive ourselves. That's a big thing. That is a really big thing. Okay, a lot that we covered today. Your homework for this week is to read chapter 4, but take your test first over modules 1 through 3. Make sure that you answer the questions that are in the file, and do your on your own, and just kind of check to see how you're doing on those. Okay. Oh, thank you for praying for me. Yes, I'm excited about my surgery. I've been in a lot of pain for many years with my back. I grew a whole foot in 1 year, so I grew really tall. So my lower back especially, has a lot of arthritis. So what they're doing is going to be doing a spinal stimulator. So hopefully this will help, so I can be able to walk and do some of the things that I like to do again. So I'm hoping that this surgery works. All right. So thank you guys. You guys have a great week. Okay. Thank you. We'll see you guys next week.